about the world. And in this scene that I'm going to read, is trying to do everything you can to kind of keep this person from slipping away. And I think the reason it felt kind of relevant is because I think as artistic people we are very sensitive and need to be treated kind of gently and kindly. And there are times when it can feel as though the insight that we have can push us away from other people or make us want to be distanced. And it just kind of made me think a bit about Lou, this scene. So what I'm going to do is read from it, and it gets a bit dark and heavy, but I don't feel too guilty about that, and that I should offer too many trigger warnings, because my craft and fiction students are way darker than anything I could possibly do in my own writing. But then I'm going to bring it kind of back round again with the last bit, hopefully, which is much more upbeat, like note to end on. So this is the scene that I was talking about first of all. It was 9 AM and I was watching The Big Breakfast. It was half term and we were back in the rented house on the island. Last night we had been watching England be knocked out of the World Cup by Romania, and I woke up fostering a sense of unfairness, nursing the idea that life just didn't work out. But I had no idea on the extent to which that feeling was going to be built on that day. I was bracing myself for Mum to come down and tell me to turn it off, for her to wail yet again, "That's for kids, Jeff." But she didn't come down and say that. She stayed on the phone. And all I could hear from downstairs was sharp, motherly notes that made me tense up more and more. I assumed Dad had done something unbelievable again, threatening even the idea that the only thing he cared about was his sex life, and the excuses he needed to keep coming up with to ensure it kept him away from our house. But then I started to realise it was even worse than that. There was something bigger moving around the house. I thought of those big black wings. Whenever I thought of Emma around that time, I had this really strong image of a beautiful woman with big black wings coming to collect her. Mum came downstairs, her face pale, in a dressing gown and rollers. "Turn that off," she said. "What is it?" "Emma." Emma was a word often used to describe a multitude of sins, stinky messes, complex negotiations and fallouts. I was used to rapidly teasing out details amongst the onslaught of my mum's accumulating despair. It was a game I hated playing. It was like pulling blocks out of Jenga and waiting for the whole stack to fall. It felt like Mum forced me to play the game, and then the fallout when the blocks came down seemed like it was of my making. I knew there'd be a moment at which all the pain burst out of her, and that was the moment I was dreading. What's happened? It's that Adam. I knew he'd lead her astray. Why? What did he do? Drugs, Jeff. She took drugs. She flashed her hand up to her temple, and because she's a stupid child who doesn't know what she's doing, her face crumpled. I jumped up and put my arm around her. What? She's had an overdose. I remember the drive to London. The capital had never felt less glamorous, and whatever castles my sister had built in the sky around had never felt so fanciful. That morning, London was a confusing combination of flecked rain on concrete, closed kebab shops, people looking like they wanted to be somewhere else. London had a brutal, almost metallic edge to it. And I remember a phrase that Emma's best friend once used when Emma said she was moving there. She said, "London's got a big swinging dick, and at some point it fucks everyone." Looking out the window, I asked myself if you could replace London with life. If London was life. Now I understand what she meant. The hurt on people's faces, all that unresolved, flaring, spreading hurt. It made me think of those pictures of lungs that they showed us in biology. Tiny little branches leading to more tiny little branches. Branches of pain that we couldn't erase, that just got finer the closer you looked. Pain made up of lies and bewilderment and sheer confusion. I looked out of the car window. I thought about the sense of menace oozing out of the cracks. It felt real and it had a sense of inevitability about it. It all flowed one way, down the drains, down to some buried, bubbling canal of pure black. I told myself if I ever went down there and touched it, I would never be able to wash it off. At the traffic lights, the indicator ticked, and Mum fumbled angrily for cigarettes. I could smell her morning breath in the hot air of the car. When she sparked up, she burnt her fingers, and then she threw the green plastic lighter across the dashboard. The cigarettes didn't calm her, they made her worse. "Oh, Emma," she kept saying, in various shades of despair, melancholy and anger. I had a feeling, one that I could barely face, that there were a lot more conversations about Emma to come. We swept up the grass-lined driveway to the hospital. As we went inside, I smelt the dank scent of overcooked vegetables in the long, winding corridors. The doorways we passed offered glimpses into wards which appeared to be pulsing with despair. Inside the wards, I could see coughing patients, ridiculously thin and pale men, old women with their eyes closed. These women looked to me like they were in a state of almost saintly pain. I thought of the nuns that scared me when I was a kid. These women were close to another place, a more serene place, I thought. They looked that way because they were readying themselves for it, I told myself. After a tense chat with a Chinese nurse, Emma was found. She was sat in the window of an almost empty daycare room. "Oh, Emma," Mum said, in a totally new voice I'd never heard before. She ran over to the window. Emma winced as Mum kissed her head and pulled her slender body to her. "You really think boys are worth this?" she hissed, clasping Emma to her and looking out of the window. The corners of Mum's eyes were wet. I'd never seen that before. I held Emma's free hand, and to my surprise she let me, although she didn't look up. Her hand was so pale and thin. She didn't say anything. She didn't even look at me. Something told me that this was one of those moments when behind all those illusions and hope and lies, you see someone for who they really are, caught in the spiral of life. After a beat, Emma's hand went to her brow. "Mum, he left me," she said, and she broke into a wrenching sob. "Oh, baby," Mum said, holding her daughter's head to her coat. She still hadn't unbuttoned it. I'd never felt so spare, so useless. I tried to work out what my granddad might do. "Can I get anyone a drink?" I whispered. Mum's expression faltered for a second and then followed. "Go and get us 2 teas and get yourself one," she said, nodding her head to the corridor. "There's £3 in my purse." Mum's handbag smelled of Parma violets and dried foundation. As I found it, Emma started shaking and then she began crying. I could see the brown roots in her hair. I could see the small pink hearts on the hem of her nipples. Stripped of her cosmetics and bracelets and earrings, she looked very vulnerable. She was all scar tissue, and Mum was trying to soothe it. "Oh, baby, 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 baby," she said as Emma started sobbing. "He's just a boy, he's not worth this, no one's worth this." As I left the room, I heard Emma say, "He just phoned me and ended it." I looked back for a second. I could see snot shining around her nose and the red around her eyes and the crazy framing of those wild, wide eyes with hair that was at once black, blonde and orange. I'd never seen her like this, but somehow I'd always known that this was a part of who she was. So much of people like Emma circled situations like these. I tried to deny the truth that we all have times when we become children, when it all falls apart, and I promised myself I wouldn't ever believe what a girl promised me, no matter how much my body made me feel like I was in love. I promised myself that I just wouldn't buy it and let love ruin me like it had ruined her. I couldn't believe I had to see my sister like this just because some guy wanted to have fun with her and because the whole thing now no longer worked for him, all because he refused to adjust and grow. I told myself that he had chosen to do this to her rather than to feel what she felt. When we took her to the car, Emma was wearing a coat Mum had brought her from home that was too small for her. I wondered whether family members ever bring the right clothes to people in hospital. Emma was kind of still in the back seat next to me for the start of the trip, but Mum's tense body language at the wheel betrayed something I already knew somehow, that a meltdown was coming. I remember feeling incredulous at the realisation that Adam hadn't visited her in hospital. It seemed to me like a judgment of him. Breakups are all understandable, but if someone's genuinely become sick as a result, surely the ex needs to step up if there's no one else around. Are they really off the hook after a single phone call? Does that really mean that one phone call is as if the relationship never happened? I realised there was no judge or jury to compel or condemn him. There was just shitty behaviour, and the flaring, throbbing wound it left. He'd just go on with his life. It seemed to me a brutal insight into how much these London types really cared about her. And I knew that this was humiliating for Emma, given all her claims that the capital would be her new home, given that it was Mum and I who were there for the crying, the snot, to fetch the tea, always in some crisis, sodding cups of tea like there's some kind of magic elixir. I started watching Emma out of the corner of my eye. I didn't appreciate at that age the different way that women loved using their bodies and their heart and their spirit and their soul. I didn't appreciate that they felt part of someone when they were in love with them. I promised myself I would never tell a woman I loved them unless I simply couldn't bear not to. I told myself that relationships were not a game, no matter how much everyone wants you to join in. So even during this awful moment, Emma was teaching me. And that was the moment I realised that when someone breaks your heart, every moment is agony. And if they've done it in a cowardly way, or if you've got desperate and sick as a result, there's all the pain and humiliation that comes with people knowing that as well. And it's so bad that you don't want to be in your body anymore. You're done, expired. Other people have to prop you up for a few steps and hope that at some point you'll walk by yourself again. And then that brings you even lower because you have to admit that you failed so much that you need to be carried. But what if you can't walk anymore on your own? Emma couldn't even speak during that journey. Once she opened her mouth, she started crying and she couldn't stop. It all came out like a torrent. And I thought that that dark river under the city was coming through her. It was like waiting for the rain to fall. Almost a relief to see it come out, but it was so scary. She was shaking, she banged her head on the window, and she tore at her hair. "Okay, baby, calm down," my mum said, and then her tone would totally change. "For God's sake, Jeff," she would hiss, "hold your sister's hand." And I would, but it was like holding onto dead leaves. Mum went between hunching over the wheel and then springing back as she tried to calm her, as if she was most scared of all that Emma would stop hearing her. It's weird, because in the future, when Emma's records got re-released, people would keep going on about how special my family was. But at moments like that, it just felt like the opposite was true, that we were just like freaks. And I didn't know that things like this happened in loads of families. I thought this was a shameful secret that showed how crazy we were. "Where can we pull over?" Mum asked me, gripping the wheel. The pressure was building in my head. I could feel it careering around my eyes. And in the end I hissed, "Where the hell is Dad?" Mum's eyes flashed at me in the mirror. "You know where he is, and you know who he's with. Just give it a rest, we're on our own," she said, glancing over at Emma. "It's just the three of us." Whatever happened to the three of us? When did it become the two of us? I was learning so many things about people that morning, about what they were really made of, about what happened when all their bullshit got exposed. But I felt like everything I was learning about people was bad, but that couldn't be true. People were cowards, people were unable to do what they said they'd do, but these disgusting messes wouldn't stop them from making the same promises in the future. I knew they'd carry on doing that despite all the mess, because in any given moment, all they want is to not feel alone. They just keep on promising you everything, trying to stave off the second they're left on their own with it all. They just keep doing it, people do. They can't help it. Adam had promised Emma everything, and of course she had believed him. She wasn't messed up at the time, but she was now. From my reverie on the bank, I looked back at the strange, dark shape of my mum at the wheel, scanning the rain, scanning a listless and unconcerned London. Me looking for a service station and Emma crying and tearing at her hair in the back seat. And I think one thing: why did no one work out that she was probably going to do it again? Why did no one work out that there was only one way to block out the pain, and now Emma knew about it, there was some point when she'd return to it, and that in the future she'd use that thing even more than she'd done before? And I hung in all those memories in a sun-kissed reverie. I was half awake, half asleep, half dead, half alive. Emma chose to make her life a truncated limb, a snubbed-out nerve ending, and I decided to keep the nerve of my life flaring, wide open. I stared up at the sky and I refused to blink until it gave me answers, and I tried not to think that in every way Emma was gone, except for one last entry, an entry that I knew must have been written the very first time she'd opened her diary. It would be the closest that I'd get to her now. So what I'm just going to do to kind of like hopefully bring things up, is I'm going to read the very short entry, which is Emma's first diary entry. And this is the first thing that he reads of her. "The sun woke me up at 5 a.m. As I couldn't sleep, I decided to creep out and go down to the sea. I just stood there watching it, but something told me I had to go into the water. Even though the sun was bright, the water was cold, and I waded in until it reached my waist. To my surprise, the ocean spoke to me. The waves said, 'Hello, Emma, I was expecting you.' In a shock, I whispered, 'I didn't know you could speak, much less expect anyone.' She smiled. 'You know, a lot of people like you come to speak to me, and a lot of people come to visit the sea. But despite them all, I've noticed you, Emma.' 'What's so special about me?' I said, rubbing my eyes. 'You see things other people don't,' she said. 'You see through people and situations, and you feel things in people that others don't. You know what I'm talking about.' 'When I'm playing music, do you mean?' The voice grew stronger. 'When you're not doing anything.' I didn't understand what was happening. I felt so frustrated that I wanted to cry. 'I don't feel like I'm even doing anything,' I said. 'I don't even know why I'm on this planet. The point of you being here is simply to be here. Every stone that ends up on the beach I have placed there for a good reason, and you are no different, Emma. You are young and headstrong, and you sometimes allow yourself to believe that you have nothing to offer. But I would not have invited you here to speak to me if that was true.' I couldn't believe it. Why would the sea pick me of all people, the girl who is too scared to put her hand up and even speak out in class, in case people realise how stupid she is? 'You have a spirit that is very special, Emma,' she said, 'an ability to get others to open up. You will inspire people.' 'How?' I asked, looking into the waves. 'It won't be at all easy, but you are on the right path. You need to look to the love you feel for people. You need to see what goes on around you and turn it into art, even if you think it won't ever reach people. And if you do, Emma, I promise you will make even more of an impact on the world than you ever thought possible.' I had so many questions. Had this wonderful being really found the right person? Somehow in my bones I knew it had. But before I had the chance to thank the sea, she said, 'I am always here for you if you need me. I am just a few steps away.' And then she was gone. I walked home in a daze.